Things you said, Doc. Oops.
Sure.
Two things you said. First of all, you said, um, "Do people ever learn from failing?" And there are some VCs out in California that will not even talk to you unless you failed at least twice.
Oh, really?
Because they,
That makes sense.
yes, yes, because they say you don't know enough to succeed at this point. So you have to fail a couple times, and on your third attempt, maybe come back and tell us about it, and we'll trust you to succeed because you know now how not to fail, or at least you know a lot of the ways not to fail.
It really helps. It really helps to have the bruises. It really helps to know where to, I mean, yeah,
And,
exactly.
or have somebody on your team that has done that before and has failed, and they can help if
Hmm.
you listen to them.
Yeah,
The second
yeah.
thing I've noticed is a lot of people don't look back in history to see the stuff that's already happened.
Hmm.
At the first used Linux conference of the Unix group, all the Linux people came there and gave talks and everything. And there's this one person that gave this really wonderful talk about Malik and all the different versions of it and how good different ones were and stuff like that. And after he got all finished, there was an older guy from the Unix group who said, "Thank you very much for your talk. I want to tell you that we had exactly the same talk 15 years ago. We came up with exactly the same results, except we actually had measurements."
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe there is, maybe there are lessons in what happened with Jabber, I mean, and sometimes you hear things like, somebody saying to me, RSS is dead. No, it's not. I mean, every major publication, RSS is used all the time. Look up RSS on Google and you're going to get 3 billion results. And most of them are, on pages that are, active on the web. So
I can give you a data point. All of my subscriptions that are not social media, all of my subscriptions, if it's not RSS, I don't use it.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's, there, I'm always a little bit miffed when we talk about things being broken when in fact we're still using them. How can it be broken if we're still using them?
I use lots of stuff that's broken.
Yeah,
I make the best
say
of
it the other way around. Like
everything is broken. We're all
RSS
broken.
is horribly broken, and I use it every day.
And you know what? You know what? Computers are the one item that ships broken, and nobody expects it to get any better. And they're always patching it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and life is like that. I mean, we're all built to fail. I mean, this is what we do.
And the other
living things.
The other thing weird about computers is if you want to turn them off, you press start.
Yeah, right. That is weird. That is weird. With some phones too, right? Just hold down start really hard. And it dies.
I was kind of confused when I got my Raspberry Pi, and it can't be restarted without a power cycle after you shut it down.
Oh, really?
Like I think you can plug in a push button power switch somewhere. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but the standard way to reset a Raspberry Pi after a full shutdown is to kill the power and bring it back. And the only way to do that is with an external switch, like literally on the power line.
Is that because it just needs to forget a lot of stuff that's in?
No, it's just a weird design quirk. Like they didn't put a header on the board that said plug in your push button here, and so it's not a standard feature of a fully built Raspberry Pi in whatever case you got.
It's I mean, the only Raspberry Pi
power supply doesn't really. The power supply might not even have a reset command. It's strange, but I love the Raspberry Pi. I was probably raving about it last month.
Yeah, they're fun. I mean,
$100 computer.
Yeah, with one of my sons we did some stuff with Raspberry Pi a few years ago, but that's all in a box somewhere in the New York apartment, waiting to be packed up and sent to California. That's where are you in New York, Brendan?
I'm actually in Jersey City. I lived in Queens until June, and I just moved to Jersey City for tax and other reasons. And the apartment I was in was falling apart.
I was born in Christ Hospital in Jersey City, and my parents lived in Fort Lee at the time. So give me the signal on when we're going to start and how this goes, because we could do anything.
Yeah, probably another 5 minutes or so.
Another 5 minutes. I wasn't sure whether, because we're now streaming, we'd want to. Do you have a way of seeing how many people are watching the stream at any given moment, or?
According to the thing up at the top, it's 12 people around right now.
Mm-hmm. Oops. I want to kill this.
We have 5 concurrent viewers on the streaming.
Oh, on the YouTube, right. I was talking about the Jitsi. Okay.
Oh, Jitsi, it's 12.
Huh. Twelve people in the meeting, as it were.
Are we going to keep an eye on the YouTube chat in case somebody wants to say something?
I don't usually monitor it. If somebody wants to monitor it and let me know, fine. But
Yeah,
we
what they
don't
do
usually.
is they set up they have an IRC that's just running 24/7, which is sometimes helpful. You guys can. Well, when we get around to it, I have more or less a story I could tell, and then follow that with just a conversation and Q&A on some things, because, I think there are just like there are 2 topics here that I could touch on that are, both of them may be cases of future failure that we can learn from. Though it may not be the same we that are on this call, that may be succeeding generations. So where did you guys meet? You met at a beer hall or something like that when you were
MIT.
at
Well,
MIT?
after our meetings, we always went to the Cambridge Brewery, which is
Cool.
about a 10-minute walk up Mass Avenue.
Yeah.
It's in Kendall Square.
Yeah. I've been there. I've
Yep.
been on countless places on Mass Ave, actually. Still miss it. Is a lot of it boarded up right now, Mass Ave, or the parts?
I
of
haven't been
Cambridge?
down Mass Ave recently. I was born in Cambridge.
Wow.
I was
Lifer.
born at the Mount Auburn Hospital.
I've been there too.
Okay.
I had pancreatitis at Mount Auburn Hospital.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And a pulmonary embolism too. The latter caused the former. But I've been fine for years. But
Good.
it's a good hospital, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
It's one of the Harvard teaching hospitals.
Yeah. A problem with all those hospitals is that they're all kind of tied in with Harvard, but they all use different collections of equipment, and
Yes.
so the MRI you have done at this one, you have to you carry the CD itself to the other hospital that can only be read by some system there. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Did a show this morning on Twit with Adrian Gropper, who went to MIT. He's an MD from Harvard Medical School, and he's no longer practicing MD. He's an engineer primarily, and talking about how broken healthcare is in the U.S., but broken in different ways elsewhere too. It's a tall order
I
fixing
had an
that.
uncle. I had an uncle that made his career writing about healthcare in the U.S.
It's a tough one. Somebody I know had a hip worked on, broke a hip in Germany. Repairing it cost 9,000 euros. Had the hip later replaced. A similar procedure in California at a typical hospital. $375,000 got charged to Medicare. And in the list of things on the bill was a COVID test. The COVID test was $750. It amazes me that the people are like praising the free market system at work here are busy, taking full advantage of a system that's pretty broken, as we were saying.
Yeah, that's why I essentially keep up my VA membership. So even though, my primary care doctor is, a civilian doctor, but I also keep a primary care doctor at the VA. So if I ever really need something serious that's not covered by Medicare, the VA usually carries it.
That's interesting, mate.
Yep.
My sister is a Navy veteran, and she's doing a similar thing.
Yeah.
She's a retired Navy.
I was in a meeting up in Toronto, and I had a type 2 heart attack, which is a kind of a mild heart attack. It doesn't do any damage. I had to have 2 ambulance rides, and I stayed in the ER for 2 days. And the total bill, because I wasn't a Canadian citizen, but the total bill for that was $3,000. I mean, if that had been the United States, it would have been $50,000, $100,000.
Right?
Or whatever.
Yeah, easy.
But that was without insurance because I didn't have insurance in Canada.
I suppose I could go back and look somewhere, but I had my own hip replaced like 5 years ago, and that was in North Carolina. It probably cost less than this other one did, but I'm sure it was up. It was 6 figures easy. It's pretty crazy. I wonder what it goes for. Just to there's inefficiencies built into it. So what is the triggering mechanism that we go to start with what the talk is going to be?
Well, from the thing that was sent out, you were supposed to be talking about SSI, self-sovereign identity, right?
Yeah, I'm just wondering when I should start, when I should launch into this.
Normally would have Jerry introduce you, so I had a good cut point for the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
So Jerry, you want to do that?
Okay. Well, why don't you do that since you're talking? You sent some mail out and I was approving it.
Okay. When you say you, are you talking to me, Jerry? Or are you
No, to
talking
Jabber. John.
Okay.
So.
Welcome everyone to the November 2020 Boston Linux Unix meeting. I'd like to introduce our guest, Doc Searles. Doc?
Hey, good to see all you guys.
You can start your talk now.
You're on mute, Doc.
Yep. Yeah, we got 13 people here, and let's just.
I didn't know I was on mute. Am I off of mute now?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting because I actually have a manual mute for this microphone. For those of you watching on YouTube, I have a microphone, and the chain runs through a cough button. So anyway, I want to talk about 2 things. One is identity, and going back into the 90s, I had an interest in this. In fact, one of the people who got me interested in it was Jeremy Miller, who invented Jabber, Jabber, which became XMPP, the standard XMPP, which is a chat system and a chat approach, which is still in the world in places. But there's a sense for a lot of people that unless we solve identity, unless we have what some people have called an identity layer for the internet, a lot of things can't happen. That we need to identify ourselves online all the time. Excuse me, one way or another. And I was intrigued by that, and I went to many over the next 4 or 5 years until late 2004. I wrote a lot about it. I wrote in Linux Journal. I wrote in other places on my blog, which back in the height of blogging time, the golden age of blogging, I had as many as 50,000 readers a day doing that. And I wrote a lot and said a lot about identity. And then I would give these closing keynotes to every digital ID world. There was a digital ID world in that time, in which I would usually just give some kind of grief to whoever spoke, because it seemed to me it was always yet another. I mean, every approach to identity was by a large company or by a startup wanting to be a large company that ended up with what I called large companies having safe sex with each other using customer data. And, rather than each of us being able to control how we identify ourselves online, and ended up kind of giving up on it, and saying so in one of these closing keynotes. But in the meantime, I ran into a woman named Kalia Hamlin, now Kalia Young, who goes by the name Identity Woman, who said, well, actually, no, there's a whole movement around identity that's really about everybody being really in full charge of their own identity in their own ways, and basically identity management being fully distributed. And I said, that sounds cool. Let's look at that. And that turned into a series of conversations that kept growing until they turned into the Internet Identity Workshop, which meets twice a year at the Computer History Museum, and the last two have been online, like we are right now, otherwise known as IIW, the Internet Identity Workshop. OAuth, OpenID, a number of standards and approaches have come out of that. It's an unconference where there are no speakers, there are no keynotes. Everybody just comes and shares what they want to work on, and everything's all breakouts. And it's incredibly productive and very open source-ish in the sense that everybody's there to share what they're working on and help each other out. So, and forgive my voice, I've been talking all day, so it's kind of toward the end of the day here. But even there, to some degree, I was becoming cynical again, because it seemed like, are we ever going to be really in charge of ourselves online? And along came this idea called self-sovereign identity. I first heard of the term from a guy named Devin Lafredo, who teaches hacking to kids on Long Island and is a really deep and good thinker, who said basically we are all sovereign individuals and we should be in charge of ourselves online. We're in charge of how we present ourselves. And the basic idea is basically that we're in charge, but it was also that we should be able to present what later in the SSI movement, and it's a development movement. Look up self-sovereign identity or that and SSI, and you're going to get like 300,000-400,000 results. There's a lot of development going.
Live streaming is starting.
Okay.
Live streaming is on.
I see. A robot voice just said we're live streaming. Okay. Hi again, everybody. I was talking about self-sovereign identity and or SSI. Look it up. It's a thing. There's a nonprofit called sovereign.org, SOVRIN.org. They're kind of at the center of the maelstrom, but there are many, many development efforts, many involving large companies as well as startups. There are code bases at the most significant ones are at Hyperledger, which is hosted by the Linux Foundation, and Brian Bellendorf runs that one there. Brian, who's best known perhaps for his work on Apache way back when. And forgive my voice, I had a cough 1 second. I'm sorry about that. The idea behind SSI is that you don't have an ID. What we call IDs, the things we carry around in our wallets. I was going to put one out of my pocket, but I'm actually wearing swim trunks because I'm in California and I'm going to go swimming after this. But if I had a wallet, I'd pull out. You want to know I'm licensed to drive, and I have something that says that. You want to know I'm over 18, or in my case 65 for some reason, I can say that. If you want to know I'm a graduate of this, or if these are called verifiable credentials, and that's really what identity ought to be. It shouldn't be I carry an ID. It should just simply be, what do you need to know? Back in late 2004, when the predecessor to this movement got going, there's a fellow named Kim Cameron, who was then at Microsoft, was there for many years. He came by acquisition, really brilliant and a good friend as well. And Kim came up with the 7 laws of identity, and they're still around and they're good. And they say things like personal control and consent, limited disclosure for constrained use, justifiable parties, plurality of operators, where there can be many, many participants in the ecosystem, but none of them are a feudal system that's holding you captive. And I wanted to bring up that Bruce Schneier calls this feudal security. He'd be a good guest if you haven't had him on yet. He's been in Boston anyway. But he calls this feudal security, but feudal identity is in fact what I just read a few days ago. Apple and Google are both wanting to do, and Microsoft wanted to do a couple decades ago, and Kim helped stop, I believe, when he came to Microsoft. The idea, and it was a part of something they called Operation Hailstorm, and the idea was that Microsoft would give you your ID, and that's your universal ID. You use it to log in everywhere. You trust Microsoft to be the back end for everything you do that requires identity. Apple wants to do that, and Google wants to do that. No surprise, we're using their phones. And it looks easy for them. And there are lots of identifiers like that we're walking around with right now, which include our phones. There's an IMEI number in there, which is the identity for your phone, the actual identity for your phone. So you can be tracked. And the system is doing that right now. And we are, in the identity world right now, in some ways, we are boiling frogs. We are very boiled. And we don't think about it. It's so much a part of the way that we operate in the world. So, for example, we want to go somewhere. We'll look at Waze or Google Maps or Apple's Maps or Microsoft's Maps app. And there are red lines and yellow lines and green lines on the roads. And you're coming into Boston. Is it better taking the Mass Pike, or is it better coming in 3 or 2 or one of the other routes? Or if you want to get off, I want to get off the 2 on Lake Ave and go through, Arlington on your way to Mass Ave. And, those are what's telling the system that there's a green line here that goes off of 2 onto Lake Street, right? Those are people's phones. Those are people's phones narking on their locations through the phone system and being revealed to Google or Apple or whoever by some B2B system that those companies have worked out. And we trust because we really have no choice. We never even opted into that. It just happened. This ought to not be acceptable. My inner Richard Stallman comes out now, right? We need to be in charge of who we are and what we allow online. And our phone frogs are pretty fully boiled. And that's becoming the model for how everything else is done. In Apple's case, is getting worse now that they're putting the same breed of chip from an ARM design that was only in their phones now into their computers, the M1. And there's a bunch of stuff that it can do that amounts to feudal security, where your phone, even though Apple will say everything about how wonderful it is that they care about your privacy, and maybe they do, but they also care more about being in complete charge of their feudal ecosystem, where they're keeping it secure by having the heavy guns up in the parapets. That's how they see it. And you're inside there, you're safe, and you're controlled. And they're promised not to look at what you're doing and the rest of it. But you're inside their system, you're inside their silo, you're inside their castle. So, but self-sovereign identity is an alternative to that. And it starts with what you need to know. I have a set of credentials. Those credentials are, here's my diploma. It's that I'm carrying a verifiable credential that I graduated from Sheetrock State Teachers College or whatever it was, and I have that, and you can know. Or the state of Massachusetts has issued me a license to drive, that I have that. what more do you need to know? And in most cases, there's nothing more that needs to be known. So, and the way identity works in too much of the world, and in the way that we defaulted to it in the industrial age, which is still with us, is that something that in the identity world, the developer world, they call the identity provider, but they call them an IP, and then an RP, a relying party. The identity provider is the state of Massachusetts, and the relying party is the cops saying, yep, I see you've got a license. I pulled you over. You got a license. You're the relying party. But when we're online, you're using OAuth. You're logging in with, with Google. They are the identity provider, and whoever you're OAuthing into is the relying party. That is that system. What self-sovereign identity does is put you in the middle of that in a way where you're not a dependent. And that's really the key. And to me, this has been what drove my interest in Linux in the first place in 1994, which is when I became aware of it. And to this day is the promise of independence. I don't need to have a computer that's inside somebody's feudal system. I can have my own. It's mine. And I'm in control of it. And I have valves on it that control what I reveal, according to Kim Cameron's 7 laws, that minimum disclosure for constrained use. So I'd like to point people to Hyperledger, to the more, we might call them blockchain, but they're really distributed ledgers that are there, that they're not so much there. There are code bases there, Hyperledger Indy, there are others. There are libraries that if you go there, you'll see that, and there's just an awful lot going on GitHub as well. A lot of this is by corporate entities, but there's a lot going on with people trying to come up with the W3C, with Kantara and others that are trying to come up with standards as well that are helping build out an ecosystem. But I sort of see it right now as almost a race, one from the distributed side, where we all are here on this call, I think, the human individual side, where we can do our own management of our own wallets that are substitutable, just like the wallets we carry in our pockets might be. And we're just simply dealing with the world in a verifiable, credential way. And on the other end, the feudal system that Apple and Amazon, I'm saying Amazon, Apple and Google are wanting to do, but I'm sure Amazon wants to do it as well. And in fact, I heard today about one developer where all of the different instances of backup, as it were, in a blockchain are all on AWS. But they're all in one contained thing on AWS, which is like, what's the point of distributing this if it's all in AWS? And where the security that we were supposed to have with the blockchain, which is, well, geez, if these 5 nodes give out, we've got 40 others or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 others. But if they're all inside one container, as it were, I don't even know what you'd call it, because I just heard about it this morning. And you stop paying your bill, the whole thing's gone. That to me is another problem with the cloud. I probably have 40 loose disk drives laying around here, but they're mine. I don't have to pay rent on them. And presumably if you plug them in, they're still going to work. So anyway, those are really the 2 topics. One is what I would call distributed or independent identity, mostly called self-sovereign at this point, and the risk of a feudal ecosystem where we're living entirely on platforms and we're not fully independent. And that to me is like at the heart of what we've been struggling with around Linux from the beginning, and even going back farther to what Richard wanted to do with the herd and the GPL and the rest of it. So that's basically my not very well organized lecture. Any questions? I'm looking, by the way, at a lot of dark rectangles that have letters on them. So I think anybody can speak up, I suppose. And now people are blinking back to life.
Yeah. I'm back in tiled mode. Apparently our presentation, and it's one of the problems I had last time with Jitsi. We had several speakers, and when a couple of speakers was speaking, like Seth, Bob's son, his presentation would go up, and that would go up in full screen mode on the streaming video. But when Bob did his presentation with his slides, he was in tiled mode, or what Bill Ricker used to call Brady Bunch mode.
That's a way of putting it, or Hollywood Squares mode.
Yes.
For those old enough to remember that. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think that the difference with me is that, and it's probably we were spared today, is that I don't generally talk with slides. I could, but I generally don't because it requires more preparation, and I think it distracts sometimes from what people are saying. I've often thought, well, if Caesar and Mark Twain and Lincoln and others and Churchill could get along without slides, I probably could too. So
I don't think that's a variable though, because Bob was talking with slides too, but it still didn't go to full screen mode.
Yeah.
That was a problem. It was only with Bob's presentation. The other presentations came up on the videos full screen. It's a Jitsi issue, and there's probably a solution.
And it's a work in progress, Jitsi is. And one thing is, on the whole, it seems like Jitsi's a little better every time I use it in some ways. That you had a glitch with it this time is,
yep.
Well, there it is.
The real problem is that we really don't understand why this is happening, so we don't know how to fix it.
Yeah, you need to, or as they said to me when I arrived at Linux Journal in '96, something failed. What did you read the man pages? Did you look at the bug list? So, we might still be at that stage here. I'm not sure.
I think part of the problems with privacy and security, well, privacy particularly, is that from my observations, about 75% of the people don't care about it. It's very complex for them, And I don't know if you ever saw the John Oliver interview with Ed Snowden about, privacy and everything. And in the end, the thing that people were most concerned with was their dick pics getting online.
Right. That was it. It was brilliant. He went to Russia and asked, he said, it all comes
Well, first he went to the United States, went out on the streets of New York, was talking about privacy and everything, and nobody could remember anything about Ed Snowden. But when he started talking about dick pics, they got very upset that the government was looking at the dick pics, not their money, not their correspondence or anything other than dick pics, right?
That's a brilliant example of marketing. What's his name? The host of the show probably put them on that track and said, "How do we actually sell this so that people care about the issue?"
Right, and that was John Oliver's point. Hey Ed, I'm going to help you market this. This is about dick pics. And it is. There was a really good study done in like 2015, but I don't think the conditions have changed a lot since then, by a professor named Turo and some others at the University of Pennsylvania, to what degree did people actually care about privacy, and to what degree did they simply acquiesce to the lack of it? And it came down to, like, everybody does actually care about their privacy. They care, but there's just, they've acquiesced to a prevailing condition where they just kind of know they're screwed. And it was their point was it was completely wrong to assume that there's some kind of deal has happened where people sacrifice their privacy for the goodies on the web. That's what marketing likes to say. Oh, well, you get all this free stuff because of advertising, and we need to spy on you to make advertising happen. And that's another one of my topics, because I was a partner in an ad agency for 20 years. And advertising doesn't have to be privacy violating. That's called direct marketing. That was junk mail, and we have now right online is really junk mail. It's not advertising.
I think with the gradual takeover of Silicon Valley, sort of just moving in and saying we're going to be in charge of identity, it's not about users thinking about it and making a conscious choice and saying which one is better, this one or that one. I control it versus they control it. It's that it's the combination of the network effect of everyone else is already doing it this way, and I have services working. I, the hypothetical user, I have services working, and they're working on Google and they're working on Apple, and to go over to something that's more private, that I have more control over, requires effort and re-education. And why would I spend the effort to not actually get more services than I have now?
Right. I know it's autonomy and independence and all those good things that we care about are a serious value subtract for a lot of people. And, it's like, well, wait a minute. I can't use this. I can't use that. I mean, a little bit earlier, somebody was telling me, you may notice, okay, I'm a little bit orange looking here because I have two incandescent lights up here that are illuminating me. And they're actually very old. They're antiques, and they even have the old tungsten, elements in them. And they say, well, here are these really cool light bulbs. They're only 2 for $5 at Home Depot. And you can control them with Wi-Fi, and they'll change color. You can actually set the color on your thing, and you just tell it what the color is. What do you talk to? Oh, you talk to Alexa. I'm not going to talk to Alexa. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. So, and I know why they're 2 for $5, because they're narking on me. That's why. I don't, or I at least suspect that. And so I'll do without that. And fortunately, that's enough like gravy instead of the meat and potatoes of my life that I can live without it. But for a lot of people, there are so many conveniences.
No, but one of the things is that people. I've been called a Luddite by some of those people because I refuse to have those kinds of products at home, right? Right. And the thing is, it's very hard to explain to people what they don't fully understand. It's always hard to talk about privacy and security with a bunch of people because so for example, one of the typical conversation would go, well, I have nothing to hide, right? Okay, can you write down your social security number and your bank account number and put that online? And they said no. Right. Then that's what I say. Okay, you understand that the consequences of putting those in a public place, right? What we don't know is what are these other things that we are putting, these companies are learning about ourselves. What is the consequence, right?
And what is the ruling party of 15 years in the future going to use against you that's being recorded now?
Exactly, right?
The default position should be record nothing.
Correct, right? And that's the part that is very hard to get through to a lot of people because they can't understand what things can be done with this data, not just today, but build a profile of you over several years, and then 10 years from now, when they can mine all this data and do some things that, even simple things, right? Like if somebody at work we're discussing some of these things about clustered computing and things like this, and the thing is, simple thing like we don't control what Amazon or Google or any of these companies do with this data, and maybe company as a whole has good intentions, but there's nothing stopping some rogue employee or some board person working there if they have the right credentials from accessing this, right? And so that's the part that I'm not comfortable with. But it's very hard. I'm not saying. It's a separate fact that now they're selling this data to third parties, and what they do with that data is yet another question, right? It's not just these companies having our data, but. Anyway, the point I was trying is that it's very hard to explain, and then I get mocked essentially when I bring.
Yeah, well, and I do too, and so does my wife, who's, as I was saying earlier, is even more privacy obsessed than I am. If she were on this call, she would never appear, and because I think she permanently has the camera on her laptop taped over. It's. But the thing is, I mean, I think in a to try to oversimplify it a little bit, just to bring it into relief, it really is a conflict. I don't want to call it a war because that's too cliched, but there really is a conflict between the need for independence and autonomy and agency on one hand, and the need for for convenience and security and a whole lot of other things for both large companies and governments on the other. And I think our community on the whole is not doing a very good job of making that clear. But I think we really, part of my encouragement about SSI is that it looks to me like something that has a real risk of success. In other words, and there's a real upside for companies to not have a pile of data about everybody. That knowing everything about everybody you come in contact with is a little bit of radon gas underneath your company. It's the you're liable for all this data that you're carrying, when in fact you don't need most of it. If all you really do need to know is that this person is qualified, or this person went somewhere, this person has a credential, that makes life a lot easier. You don't have to carry the burden of this. One of my favorite examples of a company that succeeded in this way is Trader Joe's. The Trader Joe's, the grocery store chain. So Trader Joe's for many years was run by a guy named Doug Rao. Is a 10, 12, $14 billion company out of his house in Newton, Massachusetts. He's the president of Trader Joe's. And I wrote about this in my book, The Intention Economy, which came out in 2012. I spoke to him about it in 2011. So it's been a while, but I don't think things have changed a whole lot. He told me his job as the president of the company, which is headquartered in Monrovia, California, by the way, was to go to stores and talk to customers. They have no marketing. They don't, what marketing they have is a float in the Rose Parade and an opt-in flyer. And that's beyond that. And they have a podcast. That's it. They keep no records on customers. They don't have a loyalty program. Why don't they have that? It's overhead. It's huge overhead for them. When you go to CVS, also born in Boston, by the way, and you go to CVS and they want to know your phone number. Are you, and if you don't get your receipt by email, you get this 6-foot thing that has discounts and crap you already bought, and you're never going to look at. It's a lot of overhead. In a similar way, Pete's Coffee made shopping there harder by, get an app. We want to know your name when you check in with the app, and you get it out of your pocket and you put the QR code in front of the reader. Then it goes beep, and it's crazy. It's way too complicated. So there is a business reason for not doing all this surveillance, for not carrying the burden of all this data. But we're not doing a very good job of that either, in part because we're really good in our community of saying what's good for you and me. I mean, I don't know how many times within countless conversations within the Linux community, one geek or another will say, here's how I do it, and it works for me. Do that. That's fine. That's great. Here's what you do. But we really need to coalesce. We need to coalesce around a cause that has development in it already, which is what SSI is doing. What are you doing in this where we can, get some geeks together, go forth, rig up these companies so that they're putting out and accepting verifiable credentials that aren't carrying a giant namespace for everybody that they come in contact with. So that's kind of my basic message. And I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, one of the things that I realize as I get older is that the older I get, the earlier it seems. But, we have seen some enormous successes, like Linux. Linux is a massive success. So here we are.
Doc, are you familiar with SQRL? And can you say anything about how it compares to SSI? Like what problems are they solving? SQRL is Steve Gibson's project that it's kind of web centered, and I looked at trying to integrate it with SSH, and I haven't figured out how yet. But SQRL is basically the idea that you create a personal private key that belongs on one or two devices or just one device.
Right.
And
Squirrel.
that device is your
Yeah.
identity manager. And with that
Right.
private key, whenever you encounter a new service that wants to know who you are, and the service can only know who you are in terms of, are you the same person that came to me yesterday? You create a new private key based on a hash of the name of the service and your
Right.
actual private key. And then the service gets assigned message based on the secondary private key. And I may not have described that exactly right, but the idea is basically the minimum you need to return to a website as the same person is prove that you're the same person you were yesterday, or that
Right.
you're the same person is on a different device. And that looks like really great, because his goal was to solve as few problems as simply as possible to get
Right.
the job done. And there's nothing in there about, like, you can't ask an SQL client for more information.
Right.
There's no feature for it. And so how does that compare to SSI? What problems is SSI trying to solve?
Well, I think the main problem is that you don't have to carry anything around with you. Actually, I realized, Squirrel has actually been around for a while, and
It went live, like it was, frozen protocol, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I think, not very long ago.
yeah, I don't
It was
know
in
much
development
about
for a
it, and
while.
I hate to say, I actually don't know that much about it. SSI. A funny thing about it is that, I know a lot about it in a summary way, and I know enough about it to proselytize it. But the person in our family who's the most involved is my wife, Joyce, who's a figure in that. She's not a developer herself, but she works with a lot of them. She's on Zoom and other calls, like on Euro time every day, and she's up early because we're in California. Then they're 9 hours ahead, 8-9 hours ahead, sometimes 10 or 11 hours ahead. She was one in Russia earlier. We're trying to get on one anyway, but it's it looks to me like, just looking back at it, because I hadn't looked at Squirrel in a while, that it's, I think it's a form of self-sovereign identity. I think it's an original model of that. And I think it's a really good, limited but important use case. The idea in the long run is that with SSI is you should be able to go through the world getting along with the places you need to get along with without having to actually physically or even virtually pull out a credential. You're known. You're going in. I'm a member of Costco. When Costco has their side of SSI working, all you need to know when you're going in Costco is that I'm this person and I can get in there, and I'm authenticated because there's a proximity. I don't know what it would be. It doesn't have to be biometric, but it could be. So
I guess in terms of credentials, the way you would do credentials in SQRL is there are no credentials involved in saying I'm the same person I was yesterday.
Right.
But you could optionally, the system would allow for, once you've established, I'm the guy that returned from yesterday, you're on a website or service or something, you could present a credential from some other place. Mm-hmm. And then that could be used to sign your public key in the Squirrel system. And then from then on, you only need that Squirrel public key in order to be that credentialed person on that service. But Squirrel doesn't really care how those credentials are verified or where they come from or anything. And I guess SSI might be codifying some of that. How do you take a credential from someone else and then give it to a third party and say, this is me?
Yeah, what my takeaway from this is that I need to talk Squirrel with Joyce and see where the overlap here is, because I wouldn't be surprised if there are people involved in both camps, as it were. But technically, my joke about working at Linux Journal for all those years is that I was always the oldest and least technical editor. The only code I actually know is Morse, which tells you how old I am. But I think there's probably a lot to be done there. I'd be interested to see if SSI developers could actually haul Squirrel into the world, if some of the maelstrom of activity going on around SSI could pull more Squirrel into the world.
I'm sure that there are places where it could be integrated for the function of just log in as myself.
Yeah,
All you need to do
exactly.
is store.
Yeah.
You just need to store a Squirrel public key somewhere for that user, and then from then on, they can log in using their Squirrel client.
That's interesting because basically a hash of your public key is stored on a blockchain, roughly, or a distributed ledger. They don't want to call them blockchains. And that's basically the public key side of how SSI works. But there are versions of SSI. There's a new one called Keri, Keri. I forget what it stands for, but I actually wrote about it on my blog a few weeks ago. That was talked about at the Internet Identity Workshop. That doesn't require a distributed ledger somehow. I don't know how that is, but it's a distributed ledger free approach to SSI. So, I mean, and I think basically it's kind of like, even like PKI is, there's a kind of architectural understanding that is forming. And I think in an analogous way, what's happening with SSI or even the idea of verifiable credentials is kind of like talking about PKI as public and private keys and what you can do with those. What can you do with that? You can do a lot with that. It's not identical by a long shot, but it's analogous in some small way. That there's and the sort of twist on that is that you don't need. I mean, part of what we're trying to do here is wean the world from the idea that your ID is one that's conferred upon you by an administrative entity rather than who you really are. And who you really are as an independent actor, as a human being, what makes you human in the identity world is that you can present verifiable credentials that are of use to another party. And that's it. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It's kind of...
So Squirrel is definitely, I create my identity, I own my identity, but it doesn't have any verification. The only verification is that I'm the same person I was yesterday.
Right.
But there's
I've left
no
a useful
credentials.
crumb trail that says this is, you don't need to know this again. This is who I was.
And Squirrel was built for the cases where you don't need credentials. You just want to load the profile that you created yesterday,
Yeah.
I'm done. Jerry, you wanted to say something?
No, actually, Bob.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask Doc, you are talking about maintaining sovereign identity and that this acts against the companies like Google, where they have other ways in which they collect identity information and they store it. They did a video a while back called The Selfish Ledger about the kinds of non-essential things they thought they would be doing with your identity by this time. And I was wondering whether you have any comments about how maintaining our sovereign identity can help minimize that sort of activity.
Well, I think, one of the problems with, every 2, 3, 4 letter acronym has its own misleadings in it. I think, to me, it's like, self-sovereign, the SSI is less about identity. It's not about identity itself. You go through the world and you want to say, who am I? I have a business card. It says this on it. I am this guy, but it's really just a role that I'm playing. It's who I say I am. And there are these weird social things that happen. Like my given name is David, but almost everybody calls me Doc. It's an accident of history that happened. I did something on the radio called Dr. Dave. It was a joker on the radio that I played in North Carolina 40 years ago. And I started a business with somebody else. His name was David. And so I ended up with the nickname Doc. I'm not a doctor. It doesn't matter. It's something that got attached to me. That's identity, though. To me, that's identity. It's like, who are you? People want to know who you are. And we use the first person pronouns and second and third person pronouns in ways to know who and what other people are. And that's part of how we get along in the world. But technically, there's this thing which we might reduce to simply just need to know. What do you need to know? And I think most businesses, most administrative systems don't need to know very much, and I mean, I don't know much about the thing you were talking about.
It's a question of what are they doing with all this non-essential.
Yeah, well,
information
and
they're
well, that's
collecting.
another thing. I mean, that's part of the big mystery that's out there. I mean, the big thing I've been an enemy of more vocally than anything else I've done in the last 10 years is tracking-based advertising. You know, you go to Smithsonian Magazine, you go to Slate, you go to The Atlantic, you go to, you know, less the New York Times now. They seem to have woken up, but they do it too, to a lesser degree. The Wall Street Journal. I mean, you're getting hundreds, in some cases, of tracking files stuffed into your browser, unless you've got, you know, even if you're running Privacy Badger, or, you know, Apple has its approach and Firefox has its approach, and there are any number of tracking protection things you could stick into your browser. There's no standards, by the way, in this. There's no one way to do this. And, you know, it's almost an iron law of technology that what can be done with technology will be done until we figure out what's wrong with it. And most dramatically, we saw what happened with nuclear power. We can blow up a city. Good. We did 2 of them. We're never going to do it again. We're not going to do that.
Can I interject here? You were sort of implying there's this question of what is exactly the value proposition on the vendor side for all of this pervasive tracking, and there's some things that people have noticed that really call into question that there is a value proposition in having all that data. Adam Curry is always harping on the fact that very often he'll get ads for a thing that he absolutely does not want because he bought it last week.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the cheats that are there. So I don't know if Amazon's still doing this, but, you know, I experiment with different browsers and I experiment with different everything. And once in a while, I will actually I'll behave like a normal person would who's not running any kind of protection. And I think Adam's one of those people who's not bothering. I don't know. He's a bit technical, so he might do it to some degree. But I was doing this when I bought something at Amazon. I had a JBL portable speaker that would go with a phone or a laptop, and it died. And I went on Amazon and I looked at the JBL I could replace that with. I looked at Consumer Reports, and Consumer Reports says there's a Bose one that's actually better. Okay, I looked at the Bose. I bought the Bose, and then I went, you know, now I've bought this. I am out of the market. I'm not going to buy another one. Okay, that's done. I got this little speaker. I still have it. I'm never going to buy it again. Okay, unless the Bose craps out, I'm not going to buy another one. It was at a time in my life, which is most of my life up until COVID started, where I was traveling all the time. I have close to 2 million miles with United alone. You know, I traveled all the time. It wasn't a month that went by I wasn't going somewhere. And you know, and I carried this little speaker with me, handy, right? And so every commercial website I went to after that were ads for Amazon and for those 2 products, the JBL speaker and the Bose speaker. And I'm thinking, Amazon's a smart company. They know I bought this. Why are they advertising that to me? And a friend of mine who is in the business said, they're advertising it to you so their robot can tell JBL and Bose that an ad for their products was shown to a qualified lead. What made me a qualified lead? The fact that you showed up and looked at those things.
And it's all this stuff built on lies. One vendor will sell a value thing to another vendor that isn't actually valuable.
It's actually worse. It's fraud. I mean, it really is fraud. And
advertising fraud, yeah.
It's ad fraud, and it's not even of the fraud kind where you're getting with Russian bots and the rest of that kind of thing, you know, where most of the people looking at the ad are robots that are just driving up, you know, what the robot's operator gets paid by Google to show to a qualified lead. And Amazon's in the same tracking based business, and they're making a big profit on it. Amazon is in a better position now to follow people around and advertise crap at them than Google or Facebook are, because they've actually sold you stuff and they know everything you bought. There's so many fallacies, though, involved in this, which are not only the kind of scam that Amazon there, in that case, as far as I'm concerned, it was a scam, was running on its advertisers, misleading Bose and JBL into saying that an ad showed to me, and to people like me, were shown to qualified leads. But there's the simple fact that we are actually not buying anything. None of us right now are buying something, as far as I know, at this moment. If you're paying attention to this conversation, you're not buying something. In fact, most of the time, we're only owning things. We're not buying them. And ownership is, in fact, on the Internet of Things, is a far more vast green field for services. There's a whole topic there I could go into that's just massive. There's some really good code laying around for this called PICOs, persistent compute objects. And I won't go into that, but it's on the own side of things. But on the buying side of things, the notion that you're buying something all the time, or that you could be known that well. I mean, if I go to, let me just do this right now. I'm going to add a tab. I'm going to go to Amazon. And it's going to say, recently viewed, okay, a book that I wrote, and I only went there to see, so I could do deals on top brands, find your cozy style. All of it is for women's clothing, by the way. STEM toys for kids. I have 2 grandchildren, but they're not really kids anymore. They're 10 and 13 going on 15 and 20. Exercise equipment that I'm not interested in. A whole bunch of radios that I looked at only because I wanted the image, not because I actually own the damn radios. Stocking stuffers, I mean, am I a fan of the BYU Cougars? No, I'm not. That happens to be where the code I'm talking about, PICOs, lives right now. A bunch of students and professors plus some people outside of BYU. That's where that code lives. But, and is Amazon monitoring me right now and asking me, making an assumption I'm a BYU fan because of that? Or is it, who knows? I mean, I don't know what that's about, but the guesswork is terrible, actually. And you speak to people in the business and they will tell you, oh, actually, it's very good. We know that if you're shown an ad 75 times, you'll click on it the 75th time. Well, what the hell does that mean? Did I do it by mistake? Did a bot do it and not me? Have I really seen that 75 times? How do you know that? How do you know it was me? I mean, and all of this is it's a 4-dimensional shell game that's so full of misdirection that it's beyond magic. It's Tim Huang, HW.
And there's a paper somewhere that says the scope of the money changing hands on this fraud is incredible.
Oh, it's beyond. Somebody ought to have on is Augustin Fu. He's in New York, FOU. On Twitter, he's at ACFOU, AC Fu. He's an MIT PhD. Studies ad fraud, knows more about it than anybody, and has unpacked it. He's got a thing called Page X-ray. You go to just look up Page X-ray and you'll see it. And it's a way to look, just put in the URL and you see all of the trackers that are being installed. He has like a little fake version of the website that goes up, and you can look at everything that's being loaded in. And it cascades through all kinds of third parties that are looking at all this stuff, and your attention is being auctioned live, and our RTBs, real-time bidding systems, that know where what's known about you is being advertised, and probably that be Amazon telling me, am I a fan of BYU? I wouldn't even tell them if I was. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, and they ought to know more about me than anybody, and this whole myth that they know you better than you know yourself is just absolute 200 proof bullshit. It's 200 proof bullshit. But they're making money at it, and they'll come up with all kinds of numbers to say this is true. So I mean, right now I think it's falling apart. I think it's falling apart economically because the advertisers themselves, starting with Procter & Gamble itself, Procter & Gamble yanked $200 million out of that system and found no difference whatsoever. Another university we know that way back in 2017 did the same thing with $100 million. That was, in fact, I'll just say what it was, the University of Phoenix, which does online stuff. They found that simply having ads that said, you want to get a degree with us, worked better than following people, and getting the kind of people who are okay with being followed worked. And they pulled $100 million out and didn't hurt them at all, not a bit. And I think we're going to see more than that. Now, Tim Huang, who we started to mention, has this book called Subprime Attention Crisis, and he thinks that it very much resembles the subprime crash, the crash that we had in the mortgage securities business in 2008 is going to happen here. I think it's going to kind of trickle away, actually. And by the way, Facebook and Google, who everybody bring up as the primary examples of this, are going to do fine. Google makes most of its money on search advertising. Search advertising doesn't need any of that crap. You know, you're searching for cruises, you get ads for cruises, right? You're searching for radios.
Search ads or otherwise are literally answering what you asked for.
Right, exactly. I mean, they're totally intention based. I mean, you may not want to see the ad. You may skip below the ad, because I want to, look up a mic mute. I'm looking at one of those right now, or the light bulbs I was mentioning earlier. I could look those up. Christmas ornaments. Well, show me ads for that. Fine. But there's nothing. I'm not feeling like my privacy has been violated by that. But I don't want to get stuck in the uncanny valley when I'm looking somewhere else and you're suddenly guessing at what you think I want. I think that's an inherently broken system. But anyway, my point is that both Facebook and Google, Facebook is a completely different system, which are basically they're profiling you at all times, and they're going to show you ads that the advertiser thinks categories of people with overlapping characteristics are going to want. I mean, basically on Facebook, okay, you want somebody who's, 25 and up that likes video games and lives in Cambridge, Mass, and likes bikes and books and 5 other things. And then you're going to get ads for, when the advertiser like pushes that Venn diagram on top of each other, those people fall into that. I mean, it's, if you watch the movie, whatever it was, oh gosh, what is it? Came out about a month ago, with Tristan Harris. What was it? It was about surveillance and all that. But they basically made this case that they're busy building a replica of you that's a robot you, and that's what's being advertised at. It's really not like that. It's more like there's a long roster of things that their system thinks you're interested in. That's it. And it's just matching beyond that. That's unique to Facebook. Nobody else is doing that. What's happening out in the open web, which is where most of the surveillance is going on, is that a bunch of stuff that tracking beacons have found out about you because you've been traveling around with these things is being auctioned in a live marketplace. That's what's happening. That's wrong. It's a bad thing. But I think it's going to collapse to some degree of its own weight and of its own inefficiency. So that's sort of my take on it. And I'm also not sure it's the fight that I want to have. Now that Tim has written his book, it's like, okay, great. He wrote that. He's an old friend. Go for it, dude. Same with Shoshana Zuboff with her book This Thick, which I have a blurb on the back of. That's surveillance capitalism. It reduced to 2 words. Everybody knows what surveillance capitalism is now. She named it.
The age of surveillance capitalism.
Right, that's the full name. Right.
Yes, I have it on my chair over here. I'm about to read that next.
It's.
But I held up.
I've been doing the Reader's Digest version of it, Mad Dog. I should just give you where I've gotten so far with it. Trust the data. Hold it closer, so we'll see what you're talking about there.
Well, I have to move my fingers because
what
I'm trying to show you is right at the bottom. There's this guy named Alex Pentland who is down at
Sandy
MIT.
Pentland. Yeah.
Yep, Sandy.
Yeah.
And he's saying, what we should be doing is keeping our data very private and having all these advertising agencies, make requests of us of what type of data do you want?
Yeah.
And then we sell it to them. And unfortunately, other people say that on an individual basis, it's worth only about $12 a person, and that's not going to buy too much attention. But if you put a lot of other stuff into that, you might say, how much is it worth to a government to be able to get education to its people instead of sending them to a brick and mortar school? How much is it worth for the government to get, all these things? If you put it all together, could you offer the person free internet if they went through this thing? You know, what we're doing now is we're taking our information and making it available to Google and Amazon and stuff, and they give us free stuff, storage, stuff. It's free up until you need a little bit more of it, and then you start to pay it, and it's $1.99 a month, or $2 a month, or $5 a month, or whatever. But what if you could make a business case that people could run a certain set of software, and they would basically get their internet access for free? Okay, and so they would tend to.
Oop. Mad Dog froze. Are you guys all there still?
Yeah, we're all here. He's up in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I know. He's in Amherst, and I think he just got sphinctered, unfortunately. It just went, the upstream went down to zip. Oh, geez. Well, a couple things. One is that there are a lot of initiatives right now that are all about selling. You sell your personal. So
no, you're not.
Mad Dog, we lost you for about 40 seconds there. You froze up.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, if you talk to a government and say, what type of services could everybody having internet allow you to provide them, and how much would you save? It might be enough to actually pay for that. And part of that would be to sell certain pieces of information to advertisers and stuff, but only very specific types in a specific way. Because right now what's happening is we're sending all of our data.
Yeah.
If you're using Facebook, if you're using Google, if you use Google Docs, you have no control over what data goes in there. If you're storing information at Google, you have no control. And you have no control of where it went before you sent it to them. So,
yeah.
I'm saying to a lot of people in like Latin America, you need to have control about where your data goes, because your data is actually under the control of two governments. One is Brazilian law, and the other is United States law.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. No, you can continue. I'm looking something up that I want to put in the chat. Sorry.
So we in the United States, we're very proud of our privacy laws and stuff like that. But under the Patriot Act, that just goes thrown right out the window. Brazil was all upset because the NSA was reading the emails of President Dilma. Well, It's their own freaking fault, because they were letting those emails go outside of Brazil, outside of their government, by using tools and stuff that the NSA could spy on.
Yeah.
So they need to do a better job of keeping all of that data inside of Brazil, so it's only under Brazilian law, and Brazilian control. And there will be some data that goes outside, but they should know what that data is.
It's all Hillary's fault.
Yeah. Well, so a couple things. One is there are lots of efforts out there right now to find the market for personal data, and they all look to the advertising world, which it's kind of like, I just sort of. Oh boy, I don't know how to put it.
Well, certain types of advertising information are not bad. If you're going to make a widget and you find out that the total marketplace of that widget is only 100 units, you probably are not going to make it unless the widget's really expensive, right? So that type of marketing information is not bad. Okay, and we've done it because we used to do it through surveys and stuff like that. They're very expensive. But if one of these companies could do some deep mining and find out that there's no market for that, that's worth a lot of money to you.
Yeah. So the thing is that I think there's just a lot more possibility if the demand side of the marketplace has better ways of signaling supply than supply can guess at. which is what it's doing right now. And almost every effort in the world right now to get people paid for data that's being taken anyway is in the advertising market, is in the advertising business that's so corrupt and so broken and so, I mean, truly broken, but broken in a fully ironic way because so much money is being made in it, that it's almost not worth talking about. But I think, and I actually think to some degree, the issue really isn't data. The main issue is actually personal agency, which is, us having control over how we present ourselves for constrained uses in an online world. How do we operate as individuals in the online world with the same kind of ease that we have, and the same kind of sense of security, and the same kind of sense that we're in control that we do in the physical world? Where we're, you're walking down the street, you're not wearing a name badge, nobody knows who the hell you are unless you're a celebrity or a friend of somebody in the stores. You're not being assaulted constantly. There's a reason that Dunbar's number exists as well. We're only built to know a few hundred names. It's sort of a separate point, but we don't need to be fully exposed to parties unknown at all times, even though that's kind of where we are right now. And we need to ratchet our way somehow back out of that. And I don't know if we can. I hope we can, but I don't know if we can, because if we end up 3 or 5 years from now with two identity systems, which are Google's or Apple's, and which one you're using, we have failed at our mission here, or one of our missions. But I don't think
I agree
we will.
completely that agency is a bigger issue than privacy. We should be focusing on agency. One of the biggest motivations that I had to quit Facebook, it wasn't the only reason, but the biggest motivation I had to quit Facebook was I was being inundated. This was probably like 2016, 2017, being inundated with messages that I didn't want to see that were from people I respected and trusted. And the simple solution to that problem isn't, Facebook should deal with this for me. The solution is allow me to create a third-party client that does what I want to do with the data. Right. And Facebook was having none of that because that's not their business model.
Right. It's a
and I found I was much happier just getting none of it. Just cut it
comes
off
down
at the
to
source.
this. Fortunately for me, I have I have 2 Facebook accounts. One's relatively inactive, and it's family. And most of that family is either avoiding talking politics or in rough political agreement and more or less agreeing not to talk about it. A couple of them are, Trump fans, but they also know well enough not to talk about it. The other is sort of the main Facebook feed, which is where I have a lot of relatives and old friends. I'm probably older than everybody else on this call. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm 73. At my way I've been young for a very long time.
I'm older.
Oh, good for you. You win. That's excellent. But
That dog's older than I am.
Well, my point with this though is that I have a lot of relatives and friends who are never going to be on the net anywhere but on Facebook, and I don't want to be out of touch with them. They include, my high school roommate whose life advice and everything else I value a great deal. The problem with him and with others, some others, is that they probably every third post is political. I'm in agreement with all of it, but it doesn't mean, but the fact that they're there kind of, I know I'm in a bit of an echo chamber there, but not entirely. So one of the things Facebook does extraordinarily well is, but I have.
Streaming is on.
What is this? So the thing just talked to me. But anyway, there are 13 or 14,000 members of that group, and most of them are old radio engineers, and it's a club of engineers. And I've never seen an ad on it. Maybe because I have all the ads blocked on Facebook. That's possible. But it really feels like a private space, and and the person who administrates it, the sysadmin, as it were, or the sysop, or whatever they call it, they used to call him on CompuServe 1,000 years ago. You know, he's very religious about no politics. There's no politics here. As soon as you're political, you're out, and that's blessed. You know, there are at least 2 class, high school and college classes that I know that meet, that arrange all of their reunions on Facebook. That's where
But
it is.
in the public space on Facebook, I can't say I accept you as a friend and I don't want to see it when you're talking about politics.
Exactly.
If you
can't
had
do
a
it.
third-party client that was running a Bayesian filter, you could do that.
There actually are some add-ons that do something like that. You can, and I forget what it's called. I'm running one of them there.
It would take an IMAP
I don't
bridge
like
to
it.
get
I
me
mean,
back on Facebook.
I have just huge I'm so close to getting out of it a number of times, but I haven't. Anyway, I put faux analytics into the chat, and I was suggesting going to let's see, Verge.com, because one of you posted a thing from the Verge, and it takes a minute for it to set up. But I'm putting it on there. Actually, I'll put it in the chat too. There's and you'll see what following happens on the Verge. And one of the things that bothers me about that is that a magazine or a publication like The Verge will go on and on about how terrible Facebook and Google are with your privacy, and it will do a similar thing. Now, I'm not seeing it yet. Maybe it's taking a while to come up. Maybe that one didn't work. Huh.
Well, it is showing up in the chat window. If that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I'm actually looking at if you go to that link.
Oh,
how does it go?
So what you're looking at is what kind of tracking they do as soon as you connect.
Yeah, it visualizes the tracking.
Yeah, I've got something that can do that too.
Yeah, but you got to see this one because it's really pretty. Let me see. I'm actually going to copy the.
And what you're saying is that The Verge keeps complaining about this, but it's kind of hypocritical.
Well, it's worse than that. They're the Selfish Ledger. That's what it's called. Their reporters are not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I've run into this with the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I had lunch with people from both of those. The Wall Street Journal case, she said, "You recruited me. I got my job at the Wall Street Journal to do nothing but cover this." She got reassigned.
Yeah.
They don't want to cover it. They don't want to touch it. It's a third rail because that's how they make their money.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a pretty famous privacy-focused publication that is about the most moral publication I know, and they do it too, and they make millions on it, and they know it's bad money and they need it, and it's that. Let me see. I was going to put it in here, not there. I'm going to see if the Selfish Ledger. Oh, it's The Verge. I just had Verge.
The Verge.
It's theverge.com. So, it's pretty amazing to see how this system unpacks what's actually going on. There it is. Okay, it's come up. I mean, you can zoom in and out. I mean, there's ad server requests 552, tracking requests 417, other requests 41. The time it took for all of it to download is 13,250 milliseconds, which is like 13 plus seconds to do that. Meaning the page doesn't fully load until all that crap gets in there and the auctions have happened at the back end. And as you zoom in on it, you see that, Pubmatic is also spreading out to something called turn.com, playground.xyz, adforum.net, DoubleClick about. What are the rest of these? On audience, and those go on out further, Technorate Media, Acuity Platform, hundreds of these things. There's a market out there for that, and they're looking at the shit that you've been carrying around in your browser. It's unreal how bad it is, but it's also so normal at this point.
Yeah, and there are ways to limit and there are ways to clean what gets in there, but they still will have it.
Yeah, so here I'll put down the actual link that if you go to Faux Analytic. No, that's not it. Is that it? No. Shit. Hang on a second. Page. Okay, let me copy that link. put that into the chat. Okay, there. It's fairly long, but that's what'll bring it up. And you have to wait the 13 seconds for the whole thing to load. And that's on this guy's pretty fast server. That he set up only for the purpose of being a headless computer that's being typical. That's being typical Aunt Mary, who doesn't run anything prophylactic on her computer. What's happening to her, and it's what's happening is that. And The Verge makes money on this, right? They make money when they can, a robot says that this got looked at, and then all kinds of tendentious math happens at the back end for all the agencies that are doing this. And by the way, what does The Verge actually get? They may get millions, but it's like a small percentage, like between 3 and 30. It depends on what's going down, percent of what the advertiser spends. If let's say Allbirds Shoes advertises and uses this method, of the $100 they spend, that aims toward that publication, the pub gets 3 to 30% of it.
Will we know when the bubble has collapsed, and will we be able to say that the line has been crossed and we can have a party tomorrow?
Probably. Well, it's gonna happen when all of a sudden
a whole lot of companies are going to go bankrupt.
A whole lot of companies are going to go belly up. A lot of them have already gone. I mean, in fact, one of my best friends in the UK had one of these companies. He actually said, like in 2007, he read something I wrote, started to build that out something, ended up inventing what was one of the, if not the biggest real-time bidding operation in the UK. He felt bad about it. He thought it was bad. He got out in early 2017 and he thought the crash was coming 2 quarters later. It hasn't, but he got out.
It still keeps going.
It's
like the housing bubble.
It was like the housing. It's exactly like the housing bubble. And but the thing is, it's not like the prices are being driven up. The stock market's like that right now too, right? The stock market keeps going up. Why? What's the real economy's tanked, but the stock market's going up. It's all speculative.
Yeah, I think what we as consumers of the internet will notice is that a lot of stuff starts to go behind paywalls.
Well, that's already happening, right? And we're seeing it too with the actual writers. I mean, there are many writers now that I would love to read, but they're, Ben Thompson is Stratechery, Andrew Sullivan. There are others that are good, but they're going behind their own paywalls using Substack. Substack's the big new one, right?
Yeah.
And that brings up another thing that which is, why should we always be on platforms? Why should I have somebody's platform that I'm utterly dependent on? That also, all of them, by the way, almost all of them have tracking
because of Visa and MasterCard.
Because of Visa.
Yeah, the overhead of collecting and transmitting money. I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just thinking. I mean, what they have. I mean, you look at a Substack or a MailChimp or anybody's mailing list that you happen to be on, and you mouse over the link, and you'll see that the URL is a paragraph long, and most of that is tracking cruft. Right. And some of that's innocent. It's just saying, okay, it just says that they can count how many people clicked on this link rather than another one, or looked at this one thing rather than another. That's more or less harmless, but I think there are other ways of doing that. And but a lot of it goes back for purposes unknown. I mean, that where you read, the hosting companies, stuff, and they'll say their privacy policy, and they say, we're here to give you the best advertising experience, and we and our third parties are giving you the best possible advertising experience by giving you the most relevant ads. Right. That means your soul has been sold to parties unknown.
Yeah.
That's what that says. And when you subscribe to these things, that's what you get. Right. Unless you click on nothing. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll copy the link and I'll paste it into a browser and then subtract off everything after the question mark. Right. Because that's usually, including the question mark, because that's usually how those URLs are composed beyond the Unix path that goes out to the last slash. There's a question mark and then a paragraph of tracking cruft.
What I usually do is when I copy the link, I only copy up to the question mark.
Right. That's another way to do it, but it's harder to do in an email, so that's
Yeah, you sort of have to copy it into a document if you want.
That's what I do. I'll copy it in an email or copy it into a text editor, and then strip it off there. And probably you could do some kind of weird back row with a text editor, something that will recognize this is a URL and look for the question mark and take out that and everything that follows. But I've never done that. But
right, when I do postings that go to large groups or mailing lists, I will usually try to keep everything after the question mark out so as to make for a reasonably short URL.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I just paste it in a terminal window. There's no need to open up a text editor for it.
In a what window? Sorry, Jabber.
A terminal window.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Terminal window is a perfectly good place to do it.
And
Exactly.
Open in a terminal window and then just use the line editing to drop up everything after the question mark.
Just put it.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, guys, I am going to turn into a pumpkin when the big hand hits the 6, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I think is 2 hours after we started, but I'm not sure. So, what do you do with the chat? You put it in a document somewhere? What is that saved off somewhere?
What's that?
What do you do with the chat? Is that part of the whatever this becomes, or does this become anything? Is this recorded or?
I've been taking screenshots of it as we go along, and I'm also copying it into a text file.
Okay.
Afterwards, I'll edit the text file and then post it on our website.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. So I don't have to do anything. All right. Well, this has been great.
Okay. Well, thanks, Doc.
I appreciate it. I hope the listeners, viewers, or both.
Thank you for joining us.
And thank you guys too.
Thank you.
This has been good. And and Mad Dog, I'd love to talk to you about whatever you're up to now. It's always good to know. He's got that sneaky look on his face. So yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Doc. You can hide, but you can't run. You can run, you can't hide. There's something like
that's probably a good one. Yeah. You can.
Don't worry. I will be contacting you soon.
Okay. Cool.
Maybe
okay,
you should
everybody.
worry because I'll be contacting you soon.
Yeah. Well, that never worries me. So it's
Good.
good. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.